Hello, this is Jay Mitchell, and we are back for another episode of the Libertarian Uncensored podcast, going over all the posts on the Libertarian Uncensored subreddit. Let's get right into it. So first we have U.S. Steel and Nippon sue Biden over decision to block deal from Lemon Limelight, and they said from the New York Times, U.S. Steel and Nippon sue Biden over decision to block deal. U.S. Steel and Japan's Nippon Steel sued the U.S. United States government on Monday in the last-ditch attempt to revive their attempted merger after President Biden blocked it last week on the basis that the transaction posed a threat to national security. The lawsuit filed in a federal court in Washington accused Mr. Biden and other senior administration officials of corrupting the review process for political gain, of harming steel workers and the American steel industry by blocking the deal under false national security pretenses. Mr. Biden moved to block the merger after a government panel charged with reviewing foreign investments failed to reach a decision about whether the deal should proceed. In a statement on Friday, Mr. Biden said that he was acting on to ensure that the U.S. maintains a strong domestically owned and operated steel industry. The president had previously vowed to ensure that U.S. Steel remained American-owned. The legal actions represented a long-shot maneuver by the companies to preserve a deal that was ensnared in election year politics. Presidents have broad authority to determine what constitutes a national security threat, and no transaction blocked under those powers has ever been overturned by the courts. However, Mr. Biden's move to terminate Nippon's $14 billion bid for the U.S. Steel raised questions about whether those powers were being abused, given that Japan is a close ally of the United States. In the rare cases where those have been blocked, usually involve companies with ties to the U.S. adversaries, such as China. And yeah, my thoughts on that are, I think that Biden did it because of protectionism and because the unions told him to. I personally think the U.S. government shouldn't be regulating which companies can and can't merge, even if it's with companies overseas. And yeah, I think if people want to merge their companies together, I think they should be able to do so. I don't think the government should have any say in that whatsoever. And that's my thoughts on that issue. And then we have federal court rules in favor of forcibly detransitioning transgender inmates in Florida, from AaronInTheMorning.com by Frosty Slawman. And yeah, of course, Reddit, they want all the transgender rights even in prison. It's prison for a reason. You're not gonna get everything you want. You're not gonna get gourmet meals, stuff like that. And yeah, I personally think if taxpayers do want to go to giving transgender drugs to Florida inmates, that they should be able to. But I don't think that's on the top list of anyone's priorities, except for maybe the wokest of Redditors, which seems to be most of them these days. And yeah, I personally think if prisoners shouldn't be having free healthcare in the first place. Most Americans don't have free healthcare, and yet somehow prisoners have taxpayer-funded healthcare. So I think we should probably just take that away. Let prisoners have the same privileges as everyone else. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have The Government Totally Sucks, and that's a video from YouTube from MarkDude16. Tenaciously, The Government Totally Sucks. And that was posted by Tom Q Masters. And yeah, I definitely would agree with that. The government does totally suck. I would agree with that. Then we have Genocide Joe Biden's final fuck you from Ragnar OKXG, and that's crosswords from the late stage capitalism subreddit. State Department tells Congress it plans to send $8 billion in arms to Israel. The arms transfer could be the final one the Biden administration provides to Israel. President Biden has largely ignored critics of Israel's conduct in Gaza, who has urged a halt to weapons aid. And yeah, that just goes to show you how, people are saying, oh, Trump's gonna destroy America. Well, Biden's already sending all our money to Israel, and Trump will just continue that. And it doesn't really matter, it's mostly, most of politics is just either getting stabbed in the front or stabbed in the back. And I think you definitely see that when it comes to the parties on Israel. And that's my thoughts on that issue. If Israel wants to become a state, we throw enough money in it, then it might as well be a state. If they want to become a state, I guess, and the people of America want that, I guess they should be able to do so. But at this point, I say they're two separate countries. If Americans want to send money to Israel, they should be able to do so, but they shouldn't be just extracting it from Americans without their consent. And that's increasingly what you have now. The IPAC essentially runs America's foreign policy. And, it's almost like something out of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. It's like Jews, it's like the Jews run the world, kind of, when it comes to the U.S. foreign policy. Of course, Israel and the Jews are separate, but I just find it interesting. And, yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. So yeah, I definitely don't think you're ever gonna. Luckily, most younger people seem to be pro-Palestinian or neutral. So hopefully, as the boomers die out, we'll eventually stop throwing money at Israel. But I don't want to be throwing money at Palestine either, for that matter. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have key Oath Keepers leader revealed as former Las Vegas police detective. Details about Utah-based Robert Kinch, who backed race war, suggests right-wing militias retain links with police from TheGuardian.com by Swamp Yankee Dan. And yeah, I personally don't really care for that. I think it could have been an entrapment job. I think a lot of the right-wing militia movement is federal entrapment. But with that being said, probably a lot of the left-wing militia movement, that's why I like to call Antifa. Some people say, oh, Antifa's not a militia. Well, it pretty much is a militia in all but name, I would say. I think that's probably a lot of federal entrapment as well. I think pretty much all political violence in the U.S. is probably some degree of federal entrapment. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Zuckerberg. It's time to get back to our roots around free expression. We're replacing fact checkers with community notes from Facebook.com by Doctor Who 07. And yeah, I think that's good. But I think it's just a grift. He just knows what direction the tides are turning. And yeah, that's my thoughts there. He banned my state's Libertarian Party, the guy who ran my state's Libertarian Party account. I don't think he's rescinded that ban yet. But I think he says he's trying to mark himself as a free speech guy like Elon. But I personally don't think he's that sincere about it. And that's my thoughts on that issue. But I guess we'll have to wait and see what happens. Then we have government intimidation for checks, notes, proofs, and playing cards. And that's a post from Frosty Slowman from the at TNNega74, Long Live James Connolly, the capitalist class is terrified, and it's TikTok, the MIP and all social media destroyed my business. And yeah, apparently, yeah, that just goes to show you how, even if it's something like proofs and playing cards, the government can come after you if they don't think you have the right licenses or permissions to do so. And that's why I think we gotta get rid of all this government use of force, but let people do whatever they want to as long as they aren't hurting anyone else. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Trump muses over renaming Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America from TheHill.com by Patom 13. And they had to remember when the worst faux pas you could expect from a U.S. president was vomiting on an allied head of state. And yeah, I think people need to stop taking the bait from Trump. He's been doing this for this stuff for pretty much a decade at this point. He just always loves to rile people up. And at some point, you gotta stop taking the bait. But Reddit never seems to learn that. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Trump refuses to rule out use of military force to take control of Greenland and the Panama Canal from APnews.com by LegioX. And yeah, this is another example of them taking the bait. I think Trump's probably on the spectrum. He gets a hyperfixation like Greenland, and he can't stop joking and ranting about it. And then, Reddit's like, the world's ending. And eventually, you just start to catch on to it's just an endless circle jerk. And it just keeps reinforcing itself. And eventually, you just gotta stop giving him the bait. It's like those Simpsons. If you want to get rid of Donald Trump, just don't look at him. Nothing would hurt him more. But they just keep giving him the attention he wants, and that's why they'll never be free of him. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Republicans on the North Carolina Supreme Court block certification of the Democratic incumbent's election from Yahoo.com by Ninja Lover, and they added at this point why even have elections in NC. And I think that's interesting because if the Democrats in the Congress blocked Trump's certification on Monday, Reddit would be cheering relentlessly. But since it's the outgroup doing it rather than the in-group, it's the worst thing ever. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Trump's push for U.S.-Canada merger faces resistance from TheHill.com by Corn Viper. And they added, will this lower egg prices? And yeah, this is another thing of Trump just, set circles jerking himself like with Greenland or the Panama Canal. He says, oh, we're going to merge U.S. and Canada. It's not going to happen. But, he just keeps saying it and people just keep reporting it. So it's just an endless circle jerk kind of. And yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have GOP-controlled North Carolina Supreme Court blocks revolution Democrats winner of a close high court race from NBCNews.com by Swamp Yankee Dan. And yeah, we just talked about that in the previous post. as I said earlier, if it was the Dems, a Dem controlled Supreme Court doing it to a Republican, Reddit would either be talking about it positively or not sharing it at all. And yeah, if the Democrats block Trump's inauguration, Trump's certification, it would be the greatest thing ever. So it just goes to show you, it really just matters who's in the in group and who's in the out group, and not much else. Then we have extreme pay inequality in America from previous L free, and that's crosswords from the Libertarian left subreddit. Friendly Libertarians, why is it that CEOs make so much more than the employees than they used to do? Studies show that the gap has widened by a factor of about 10 in the last 30 years. This can neither be good nor natural for market forces. What do you think is causing this and how? Without placing a wage cap, can it be solved for libertarian thinking? And yeah, ultimately, whatever people generate in revenue is usually what the pay they'll get. I personally do think, you could have an argument that CEOs are to take too much for themselves, but ultimately, as long as they keep the economy running, they can take as much as they want, I would say. I think that's the libertarian perspective. As long as you're not hurting anyone else, pay yourself whatever you want to. And yeah, that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have So Much for Journalism from Tom 13. That's a Tom the Dancing Bug comic they shared. All the President's Billionaires, Washington Post. And that's Woodward and Bernstein discussing Nixon's break-in. And they're saying, this means the president is involved in the political burglary. We gotta take the story editor. And they go to the editor. And the editor says, looks like your facts are solid. And then they say, so we're running the story tomorrow. Are you crazy? What world are you living in? The owner of our newspaper is one of the wealthiest men in the history of this planet. He has vital business interests everywhere, government contracts, and the president said he'll punch anyone who criticizes them. Do you have any idea who a centi-billionaire can lose if he crosses the president? And then Woodward and Bernstein say, well, then we better refrain the story. And then the editor says, demonstrate we're going to play ball. And then the story comes out. The president's colleagues defied norms in order to gather info at Watergate office. And yeah, I think this is just another kind of DNC circle jerk post. The Washington Post and other, legacy media are increasingly irrelevant regardless of the stories they publish. So, you might as well not get on Trump's bad side because, he really doesn't like people who get on his bad side. So, yeah, I personally think, they already published a lot of stuff that goes after Trump. They were pushing collusion with Russia for years, and now they can't push it anymore, so they need to find something else to push. And yeah, that's, they can push whatever they feel like. I believe in a free press, but now people realize that it's just that, they're entitled to the same amount of trust as everyone else's, even like the conspiracy theorists at InfoWars. They have the same, both of those are entitled to the same amount of base public trust, 0. And I think people need to remember that when it comes to the media. And I'm definitely excited I hope we get to see them close of my lifetime. But I don't know. Well, I guess we'll have to see what happens. Personally, I do think, stuff like cable news and the legacy newspapers are on the way out. But I guess, again, we'll have to see what happens. And that looks like that's all for today. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.